Today is Thursday, July 19th, and we are meeting at the Nepieskin Town Hall, 7:05 start, with all directors except for Bruce Miller, who is going to be absent today. Public, 7 individuals present, with including Ellen Barth of the Wisconsin DNR and Melissa Curran of Stantec. To get the meeting started, I just want to, before we get to minutes, want to share, I've given all of you your minutes personally. I didn't mail anything this time around. So you should have had a chance to get them and receive them. Given our initiation of the significant new restoration plan, there will be no shortage of things to talking about. And with that in mind, I'm going to be looking to run a tighter ship on meetings, whereby we stick to things that conform to our mission, which I will recite. We are dedicated to implementing a practical plan that allows Rush Lake, its affiliated streams, and connected wetlands to achieve their full recreational, aesthetic, and wildlife potentials for the mutual benefit of those who live, work, study, and recreate in the watershed. So what that means is if somebody is commenting on a past topic without bridging it to the future, talking about other projects without relating it to our project or the future here on Rush Lake, or other matters in general without relating it to us, I will be interrupting and asking you to bring it back to a forward-looking topic. Also, any complaints or suggestions, we'll be looking for endorsements and support. There's no shortage of things to do, and if you have a concern or an idea for improvement, I encourage you to champion that, and I will be asking for such support when you present ideas. So with that, let's get moving. Minutes I distributed were on April 19th, May 3rd, May 24th, and May 29th meetings. Those were a general meeting, a planning meeting, and question and answer meetings with Stantec and Kaysen and Associates. Any questions, comments, or remarks on those minutes before accepting them?
Could we ask one at a time, if anybody's starting out with the April 19th?
Sure.
And then move through them rather than do them all at once?
That sounds good to me, Ron. Thank you. Anybody have any concerns with April 19th?
Motion to approve.
Motion made to approve.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion is made and carried. April 19th are approved. May 3rd, special meeting where we distributed our request for proposals and spoke to our DNR Lakes friend, Ted Johnson. Any questions or comments on those?
Move to accept.
Okay, Art moves to accept.
I'll second.
Ronick seconds. All in favor of accepting the May 3rd minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Next, May 24th minutes. These are the Stantec Q&A meeting minutes. Any questions or comments on those?
Move to accept as printed.
All right, Chuck has moved to accept.
Second.
Art seconds. All in favor of accepting those minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, those minutes are accepted. And finally, May 29th meeting minutes, which is the Q&A meeting with Kaysen and Associates, and then deliberation on partner selection. Any questions or comments, concerns on those minutes? Seth moves to accept.
Second.
Bob Luda seconds. All in favor to accept the May 29th meeting minutes? Aye. Opposed? Those meeting minutes are accepted as well. Okay, second, 7:10, moving to the treasurer's report. Todd?
The prior checking account balance from April meeting was $9,326. Today's balance is $10,346.97. It's a net increase of $1,313.71. The result of increases from the Brat Fry earnings of $502.71 and Brat Fry donations of $375. And the sale of a final pair of pontoons that Doug had for $500. These increases were partially offset by $64 in administrative costs, which came from $54 from completion of annual licensing for the Wisconsin Charitable Organization Credential, and $10 for the Wisconsin Non-Stock Corporation Annual Report.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Just one comment, the pontoons, we've been looking to, the first pair we sold back in 2013, back when we agreed to sell both sets for $500. There was a prospective buyer who was interested in them, who fell through, and I'm more than happy to purchase them. I've expressed that before. There are no other buyers to my, no other interested parties to my knowledge. So I've already written the check and gotten it into the banking account, so if no objections, I'd say the second set of pontoons, or I'm purchasing them consistent with prior votes of the board. Okay, no concerns there. Okay, so any questions or comments on the treasurer report? Okay, well, I would move to accept the treasurer's report.
I'll explain it to her.
I'll second.
All right, the motion made to accept the treasurer's report by myself and Seth. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's accepted. Thank you, Todd. 7:12. Moving on to lake management plan discussion. Melissa Curran is here tonight. She is our project manager from Stantec. She was very engaged in the RFP, request for proposal process, and has a very strong background in botany and grant writing, and helped Stantec put forward a good proposal that won our hearts. Thank you, Melissa. Since we selected you on May 29th, and I let you know, I think the day or two after that, we've had some continuing meetings. You and I, we've been on the lake. We've also met with Ellen Barth of the DNR, Ted Johnson of the DNR, and also Aaron Fegestad of your team was in that meeting as well. That meeting, just to summarize it from my perspective, was wholly consistent with the presentation that was put forth by Stantec, being multiple grant avenues looking to be pursued, pursuing those grants in a very timely fashion so that awards could be received in the winter of 2018 to spring of 2019, and we would have projects in play on the lake in 2019. My belief and understanding from leaving that meeting with Ted and Ellen was there was general an agreement in direction that we were going forward, and we would be moving into a phase where we'll be writing those grant applications in order to receive those awards in early 2019 for projects to be initiated in 2019. Melissa, do you want to jump in here and just share what your thoughts are on the process? This was just a brief summary from me.
Sure. I put together that. Do you want me to pass out the grant summary that
Sure.
I sent to you? I only have 10 copies, so maybe people have to share a little bit. But essentially, these are really the 3 DNR grants that we are considering. And as Brett said, they have various deadlines. The first one that will allow us to do work on the lake as soon as 2019 would be an established population control grant, and that will require a management plan in place by the end of this year. And I will work closely with DNR, with Ted specifically, to iron out what that management plan looks like. And then that management plan will ultimately get rolled into the updated lake management plan that we will prepare after we secure grant funding next year. So In summary, we hope to get a control grant that will allow us to actually do some pilot projects on the lake as soon as next year. We'll hopefully secure funding to update the management plan, which we would ideally start next year, and will take an entire year, all of 2019 and into 2020 to update the plan. There'll be a lot of public input. DNR was very adamant that there needed to be a lot of education and outreach with the plan. So DNR did support the idea of securing 2 grants to update the management plan, 2 $25,000 grants, so that would be a $50,000 $50,000 contribution from DNR, and I do have the match number, so that's one thing I want you guys to pay attention to is with some of these all of these DNR grants come match. So the lake management planning grant, if we maximize that $50,000 from DNR, it would require $24,000 roughly in match. And I would approach a number of partners to be able to secure that match. The established population control grant, that can go up to $200,000, and that requires a 25% match. We're not quite sure what that project will entail yet. I don't think we'll ask for the full $200,000, so what match we need for next year is a little nebulous. And some of the partners, Fish and Wildlife Service, I have already approached Fish and Wildlife Service. I had an informal discussion about a month ago with the NRDA coordinator out of the Green Bay office. They are in support of this project. They need more information. I had a very informal conversation with Fish and Wildlife Service last night at a meeting in Milwaukee, and Fish and Wildlife Service is bringing their trustee committee to tour Rush Lake. They did fund a couple projects, the dam, and then they also funded some land purchases. So they're going to bring their trustees and have a tour. So this is a great time to hit them up for a little more money. So they are fully supportive of what you guys are doing here. Any questions? You guys can take this home and kind of look at it.
What, it said that this requires a 75%, that's 25?
Yeah, yep.
So Brad jumped to 75?
Yeah, I mixed up my,
Okay.
yep.
Well,
And that's the same.
it's right
for
depending
all
how
of
you
them.
look at it.
Yep,
Melissa,
yes,
I need what?
you need one, you bet.
Yeah, Melissa, we're missing one director, so
Okay.
I don't need one, and the missing director doesn't need one. So if all the
I have-
copies you have make it to these guys,
I have 2 extra copies.
We'll take one.
Okay. I didn't know how many would be here, sorry. I'll print more copies next time.
oh, you're fine. So now everyone should have one, right?
25%.
Yeah.
Almost everyone.
Melissa,
Yeah.
are you the person that does or writes the management plan?
It'll be a team of people at Stantec that writes the management plan, but yes, we will lead that.
Well, this is 25, roughly 25%.
I will do more of the grant writing and the project development, working with kind of all the partners to bring everything
Yeah,
together.
you're right.
And one thing we mentioned, I should mention this, Ted Johnson, who will be kind of the lead person as we work through updating the management plan, he expressed an interest that this be a living document, so we can use the old plan for reference, but the new plan, and I'll try and get more information on what he means by a living document, but we don't have to reiterate a lot of the detail, and there was a tremendous amount of detail put in the old plan, and he expects that it'll be a living document, meaning there may be annual updates to the plan that will kind of refine the direction. So it'll be a plan that then is updated and revisited annually. That's would be his desire.
My understanding of Ted's comments also were we didn't need a 300-page plan
No,
coming around.
no,
It's,
and I think that detail's already been done.
it can be robust, but
Yep.
more concise at the same time.
Yeah. And so I would expect using a lot of the money that we get from DNR to do a lot of education outreach, really making sure everybody is engaged in this process.
Yeah. Who asked? Kevin, please.
So, is this different than one of the invasive species grants?
So this one that we'll use will be really targeted towards invasive species, and we're kind of, as Ted said, putting the cart before the horse a little bit. So we're trying to do some management of the lake before we really have a good sense of all the overall ecology of the lake. He's fine with that, with the understanding that it's kind of a pilot project, so it'll be a smaller invasive species control project next year that we'll use to gather a lot of information and do some trial experiments. Maybe we'll engage some research partners to come and help us monitor it, so it'll be a smaller project next year, and then once we do the bigger plan, we will hopefully do bigger projects after
So
that.
will it mainly be cattails, or if we find something else out there?
We found Phragmites, non-native Phragmites, so I'd love to target a cattail control project and Phragmites next year.
Yeah, when we, Melissa and I went out on the lake, we went off the east shore, off of Islandair Road. We drove south into the deeper spot of the lake where we collect the citizen lake monitoring samples. That's where we found the invasive Phragmites on the eastern shore, kind of just beyond the cattail bed that's there. And from there we went to the south boat launch. We went back to the north end of the lake via a more westerly route and went to the north boat launch through the channel that we were talking about spraying and to the dam and came home. I want to say we checked 5 different stands of Phragmites and only the one was invasive that we saw. So that at least is a positive thing.
But still, nonetheless, if there's one, there could be more. So if you guys, know of any around the lake, please let me know. I'd love to check it out.
Yeah, and on the comment of other invasives too, Kevin, when we were going through the channel to the north landing, you characterized the amount of purple loosestrife in the channel as a lot, where me being not a biologist or a botanist would have said, it looks like we have some, but not that much. But whatever the case is, if it's out there and it presents a future risk and we can stop it now, I don't know why we wouldn't look to get ahead of that when we can just take a bird in the hand, so to speak.
Yeah, and I spoke with Alan, and so I will reach out to Brock and ask him who, where, who's doing it.
Somebody raised beetles for Rush Lake.
That's a couple of years ago. I forget where that was, but I remember
Who
it.
did that
I
though?
don't remember.
I thought they could be purchased someplace. I don't remember any of
Oh, I thought we brought beetles somewhere and somebody had the little, things to keep them and, no, nobody remembers? Maybe it was just my.
I thought that
I thought there was a Ripon teacher or somebody like
No,
that.
I thought that was was somebody who was affiliated with the DNR. It was one of the, and they came in, it was a couple guys, if you remember, two younger guys, especially compared to us, but they were going to go and set out some of those and release them at that time. But I thought that
maybe
was
Rockland.
DNR
I
affiliated.
don't know.
I'll follow up with Brock. He's the one that manages he's likely to retire at the end of this year, so I don't know who will take it over after he's done. But we'll figure out a way for next year to get beetles here.
So
And I don't know if they need to be released every year. I'm really not that familiar with it.
So is some of this Phragmites being brought in by Bylaw?
That's a commonly asked question. Perhaps, if they're moving some of the stem fragments around, more likely boats, if they get, stem fragments or the root fragments. It's always a little bit of a mystery how that goes around.
Question on some of the math here. You were saying that all of these grants we got to kick in like 25%. So 200,000, that would be 50,000, wouldn't it? Or
Because you have to also match your match.
It's of the total.
Yeah.
okay.
It's of the total.
It's of the total project, so your total project cost is what the DNR will give you plus your match. And then that's what you have to match is your total project cost, so you do have to match your match.
Okay.
So it's like if the price tag on the job was $100,000 and it was 75% DNR funds, the DNR pays $75,000 in a grant and we'd pay $25,000. So 75 plus 25 equals 100. The 25K we pony up is the 25% that we're talking about,
And then plug
which
all
is a
those-
third of 75. So depends what way you're working your math.
Okay.
And that's why I put those numbers, because it isn't totally obvious when they say 25% match. You do think it's less
Okay.
than what it is.
Ellen, wasn't that the same way it was the last time?
Glad we got an accountant in charge.
Plan? That's what I thought.
I believe when I see the grant paperwork.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we should be making phone calls and trying to hit up some other people for financial partners as well.
Yeah.
As far as other organizations.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that falls into where I was looking for us to go on grant writing approach and needs. Because you talked about other partners that we can look to assist with match. One thing I want to make very clear, and it doesn't need to be done tonight at this meeting, but have a very clear delineation of who's driving what so that we're shaking the right trees with the right people to help get this across the finish line. So I think I just said pretty much what you were saying, but a little more broadly.
Yep. The more match you have and the more diverse match you have, the better it scores through the DNR process. So the more the merrier. Match can be cash match can be donated time, labor, equipment. It can be really anything that helps support the mission of the project.
Somebody needs to go charm the people that make the swamp doubles that are built in Wisconsin. And just say, don't you have one that you need to test? No, it's made here. I think so.
Yeah. I contacted them a couple years ago, and they sent me a list of local contractors who have their products, none of which have the Swamp Devil. So I think that's probably on the list.
That was a couple years ago. Try
Yeah,
it
I
again.
understand it was a couple years ago.
I think that you're missing an opportunity.
I can knock on the door, I'm half hour away.
Yeah, and that gets to my comment. We need to delineate who's talking to who and what those parties are, and that's something that Melissa, would you just talk about the grant writing approach? Because the way I understand it, and this isn't going to sound smart, is we're going to write a grant application that's going to say we want X amount of money to do Y projects. Y projects gets determined through some planning approach, and the cost of doing those projects gets calculated after you figure out what you want to do. But that's not just Aaron Fegestad going into a room with his accounting green eye shade on and figuring out what it is. There's a more robust process there, right?
Yeah, so, let me just take this pilot project, for example. We don't really know what a pilot project looks like. So we might, sometimes we work backwards from the match. Sometimes we say, okay, we can secure this much match, so this is really the amount of DNR requests that we can get. So sometimes that's the approach. Sometimes we have a very clear scope, an idea of what we're doing, and then we can budget accordingly. There certainly is, there's the contracted services. Then there's all sorts of other services like, executive director time. I don't know if there's any needs of the organization. I would say you definitely need to account for some administrative fees associated with administering a grant. So you guys will have to figure out internally how much that is, what that looks like. We'll have to put together a pilot project plan, and maybe we'll sit down and figure out we want to do X number of treatments, and this is the size we want them to be, and this is the location we need them to be, and that's what Stantec will do. So we'll figure out the costs associated with doing those pilot projects per the design that we come up with. And whether or not that is a small committee that decides that, or we present a plan and bring it to the full board, maybe I'll ask you what might be the best approach to really define what that, to help me define what that process should be.
Yeah, my thought on it is I don't know, and I say that with a straight face because earlier this year when we were figuring out who we wanted to work with on this process, I talked to all these guys in the Prairie Pothole region, most of them with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, who manage tens of thousands of acres, and they came back to me with materials, reading materials, their own personal experience, and there's a lot of different stuff getting out there. And one thing, there was one comment in a really good, fantastic 56-page report called Cattail Management in the Northern Great Plains. It was from the University of Minnesota Northwest Research and Outreach Center, published in 2016, and it was at a cattail symposium in North Dakota or South Dakota just within the last 2 years. And what this wildlife manager said was, cattails are likely at a point where we can do no wrong, and we need to be able to jump on opportunities like a dry year. So, and the common theme of all the conversations I had with these U.S. Fish and Wildlife guys is we're throwing darts. You're probably going to be most successful by having a variety of techniques on a variety of timelines. And some things will work and some things won't work. So what I did is I compiled a list of all the stuff that they were telling me about. And I've got roughly 24 approaches here that could be used out on the lake. 3 of them we're currently using or have used: water levels, grazing for muskrats, and spraying with herbicide. But there's another 7 that are commonly used, and there's another 3 approaches that are more experimental in nature and unknown quantities. So my comment is really a question. What do you think the best approach is for a thing where we've used 3 of the levers we can pull? There's maybe 10 of the levers we can pull that are commonly used. How do you pick the techniques you use when you have a menu of 10 and we've only used 3 to date? That's really the question. Because if you say we want to do all 10, that would be great. And we can get the money to do it and we can build support. But that's probably more than we could bite off on an initial pilot project for something that's supposed to be a little restrained with the cart ahead of the horse comment, right? So over the next 10 years, what's on the table? Probably a lot more than what's on the table in the next 12 to 24 months. So that's my comment in the form of a question. I don't know. So what do you think?
Well, I think that's a fantastic start, first of all. So that's great that you've done the research. I don't think we're at a position where we can make an educated guess on water level manipulation. So I would say that that's kind of, off the table, at least for this pilot project. I did, while we were out there, see a gradient. There were some drier sites, there were some wetter sites. So off the top of my head, it would be great to pick a drier site and do a couple different treatments in what we would consider drier site, and then do a couple different treatments in a somewhat wetter site. And I wonder if that comment related to take advantage of drier years, I wonder if that's really more of an access issue.
That is what the
Yeah.
people I talked to, it was all, you can get equipment out there, you have exposed seed bank, it's easier to hurt cattail with whatever your management technique is. It was just better for everything.
Yeah, and by next year, we'll have what we call a trucksar, so it's like a boat on tracks. So we shouldn't have any access issues getting into some of these areas, whether they're wet or dry, which is great.
The trucksaur it's just like the Marshmaster that Steve Lenz told us about the other year. It's just a different manufacturer, tank on pontoon boats.
And it has like this arm, is my understanding, and you can put all these different attachments on it, and so you can do a bunch of wicking from this arm. You can, any number of attachments. So that's that's what appealed us to this trucksar versus a Marshmaster, is the flexibility to do more with it, and it's lighter weight.
That'll be available through the DNR, or?
Very few people have a trucksar from what I've heard, yeah.
We're not buying one either, sorry.
So how is this becoming available to us?
It comes from Holland, so it's been quite a journey for it to get here. It's gonna come next week.
I didn't mean that.
But it's gonna be yours, isn't it, Stantec?
Stantec,
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Stantec's
yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Oh,
So it'll be part of the treatment that we do. We'll just use that
Trucksar.
equipment, trucksar.
RLWRI.
Sometimes if you Google trucksar, you'll get like a medieval cartoon character, but that's not what I'm talking about.
one quick question.
Yeah.
When you back to the grants part of it, I know when we applied for grants, and Tim Lassat, from the DNR, was instrumental in those grant applications. And one of the things that he could utilize, we had sold a piece of land. I can't remember if it was a DNR, if it was, but anyways, we donated part of that price.
Yep.
And they could utilize that. And it didn't have to be, that donation or that piece of property didn't have to be in town of Rushford or Ripon or Nepiesco.
Okay.
So he
I
utilized
guarantee that we've used that match for an ARPA grant already.
that. You have already.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
The last
long
one.
gone.
The last one.
Yeah, they're gone.
There's gonna be another one, I think.
And the match has to
Well,
meet
then
the
that's
timeline of
different.
the grant period. So if there was some land acquisition or something that happened outside the grant period, then we wouldn't be able to use it as match. So it's gotta happen in the right time period, and it has to be.
When's the right time? Can you,
So when we get awarded the grant. So if we are successful with the initial established population control grant, meaning we write the management plan, we submit in February, we won't know until mid-April.
so it'd
So
be next year when it would be,
Next year, mid-April is when we would get, when you would get notification that you've been awarded, but then the grant paperwork comes a little later, but typically when you've been notified, that's the official start of the grant. So no earlier than mid-April
okay.
of next year.
For the invasive species grant.
For the, yeah, the first grant that we, yes, the invasive species grant that would allow us to do work next year. We would be notified by mid-February on the plan.
And the planning grant is the key that opens the door to the other one, based on our conversation with Ted. If the planning grant doesn't happen and we're not doing a plan next year, there's no, the other grant is not happening.
I don't see that to be the case. I mean, DNR is pretty upfront about these projects, so it's a great project, so I'm pretty confident that we'll get funded.
So on the needs side, and I had the comment before, what I'd like to do, Melissa, is work with you on delineating the who does what and how we get those pieces. If it's finding grant match guys and compiling that list. You know, I could see a variety of small focus groups to try and tackle some of this stuff, because some of us may have connections to parties that others don't. And so that we could conceivably have a group of a handful of people working on funding matches and making phone calls or talking to people versus other aspects. Like Ted talked about the importance of having public buy-in and getting ahead on a public survey. So that might be a thing where we'd have a separate survey component if it makes sense to accelerate that. I shared in that meeting, I'm very happy to get the ball rolling on getting a survey out, and that was all something that Ted shared. It gets vetted with central office at the DNR so that you're not asking leading questions that draw a false picture of the situation. So like funding grants, public survey, if there's any aerial imagery needs, Ellen, you've shared some stuff here that we might have a new set for this year, so that might check that one off if there can benefit it. Focus groups otherwise for techniques or whatnot. You know, those were the four big areas I could think of for things that we might need to get ahead of between now and our fall meeting. Because where we left off with Ted was the grant deadlines are in December for the planning, and invasive species is February.
Yep.
So Ted's view was, you know, we would, and I believe we were in line with this, we would look to get a first pass on our grant applications largely done sometime between Halloween and Thanksgiving, and we would sit down and provide that to Ted just for his, his counsel to see that we're checking the boxes and fitting it in line with what we had previously talked about. So if that's what we're going to do, we're going to be turning over a largely completed first pass of the grant application, call it November 10th. We're going to be doing most of the grant writing work between now and our fall meeting. Because our fall meeting is going to be just 2 weeks before we send it off to Ted, conceivably.
Do you just have one more meeting before the end of the year?
yes.
One planned,
One plan.
but we can schedule more if it's needed to keep the ball rolling and put out a better product.
Okay, so the established population control grant, the one that we would use for the pilot project, does require a management plan in place that needs to be approved by the board. So I should know when your next meeting is so that we can get that plan drafted in time for you guys to have time to review and approve it at the meeting. So is that scheduled yet, or?
Third Thursday in October is October 18th,
Okay.
which,
Well, that could be shifted depending on
Yeah.
what number.
No, as long as I have a date in mind, I just didn't, that's plenty of time to be able to write a plan.
yeah. Okay, so I'll make that an agenda item at the October meeting. And that date, just jot it down now, October 18th is that date.
Would it be advisable to maybe move that up to like the 11th of October, and that way we have just a little bit more time? We're still I mean, where usually we talk about meetings at the end of the meeting, you know, sooner have a little bit more leeway as far as not that all of a sudden something comes up and there you are, you got 2 weeks left to try to do all of this.
October 11th would be the Thursday before the second opener for duck hunting, because it's a September opener this year. I'm just
Whatever.
thinking about- I don't have any issue with it if we've got meeting space, and I haven't confirmed that date with Kyle Braun of Nepieskin, but
Should be fine.
so we could pull it ahead to the.
I personally would prefer the 11th. I don't have to take vacation that day.
All right. Well, should we do that?
Should I make a motion?
Sure.
Move that our next meeting date be scheduled for October 11th.
Art's making a motion to schedule our next meeting for October 11th.
A second.
Seth is seconding it. So that is a Thursday, October 11th. Nepieskin's available, so we'll plan it here at 7 o'clock. Just because we know on the space and it's a little bit quieter, which is beneficial for audio recording. So, motion made and seconded for October 11th for our fall meeting. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, October 11th is the date.
Okay, so we'll have a management plan. Do you guys need like a week to review? I mean, what is typical that, you know, this could be a 15-page plan, so. what
Should
would
be fine.
Okay.
A week would be good, yeah.
Okay. And then, as people are thinking about match, all match should be accompanied by a letter of support. So, match, letter of support, and I can draft a few letters of support examples that, that you could have on hand, so that if anyone is giving match, they should.
Does that need a signature too, or?
Yeah, so it should be, you know, something that looks a little professional, you know, addressed to DNR or maybe to the Rush
No,
Lake
not
group.
to us.
To the Rush Lake group. Sometimes I do surface water program. You could do either. So addressed to this group, specifically identifying what the match is and what the amount is. So if it's in kind, you know, they're donating some expensive, you know, some equipment or something, there is a rate sheet that you can identify to figure out how much match is, donated match equipment, if it's in kind, if it's your time, depending on if you're a volunteer or if you're a professional, there's different rates. So I can help you figure all of that out, but just know that there is a letter needed, and sometimes that's what takes the longest, is getting letters from people.
I don't know.
What would the volunteering part consist of? Examples? I know you say time in that, but do what or where?
Education and outreach, if you're volunteering at an event. So if you were to do like your, you know, the Brats at Pick and Save or Webster's, that if it were in the grant period and you participated in that, you could have counted your time as match.
An open house to discuss the project. Somebody has to be here to be the RLWRI meeting.
All of our time right now can be counted as match if it were in the grant time period, meetings you guys have. Because anything related to the scope of the project.
Do you have a short write-up possibly that maybe if we did for like a DU event, that we could speak of it for a few moments or something and let the community, those that all come and stuff, maybe be aware of, or something that, just answer something.
I can write something up.
But any time
Make
spent
sure
on
we use it first.
any time spent on the project before the grant is awarded, we can't use as match. Reiterate that.
Don't worry, I asked that question last week.
It has to be during the grant time.
Okay.
But you can certainly get people excited.
Well, yeah, so, okay, but even if I just had some bullet points, to just, because there's so much. Right. During my socializing.
Are you
For
looking?
the grant.
Are you looking for this for the Ducks Unlimited dinner to be held in a couple weeks?
Possibly.
Possibly, yeah.
Okay.
However, if that doesn't happen, that's also okay, because there'll be other things.
We're happy to have free publicity at our Ducks Unlimited dinner event. We had the booth, just for everybody's benefit, we had the booth at the DU dinner a couple years ago, but it didn't seem to have the same outreach effect, if you can believe it, as being at Webster's with an info table and running the Brat tent. So, so we were there a couple of years ago, but that doesn't mean the MC being on the microphone and talking about it for 30 seconds wouldn't be more impactful than what we had done before.
That's what I would be looking at, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
What I'll do, I'll jot up some bullet points on what we're after, and I'll circulate that to the directors after the meeting, just to make sure there's general consensus on that, not that Brett's putting down his own twist on something, and with support, I'll get that soon.
One quick question back on that grant. Is the grant period from January 1 to December 31st?
No, so it's when the grant agreement is signed or the grant is awarded, I forget, do you know, is it when it's officially you're notified of the start date, or what is it when it's signed?
This isn't my project, sorry.
I'm pretty sure it's when you're notified, and they'll provide a start date when you're notified of the grant. So for this first one, the Established Population Control Grant, April 15th roughly, and then it can be a 3-year project, so then it can be 3 years after that.
Anytime in that period.
Gary?
Is that, all right, if we get the grant, do we have to have the match before we get the money?
You have to have the correct amount of match every time you seek reimbursement from DNR.
Okay. So, in like, if we're out there fishing carp on a lake, we can count that as a...
Yeah, so if, you know, the Established Population Control Project, maybe that's not super applicable. The CARP, certainly that's applicable for the management planning grant.
It may not be, you say?
It may not be. So if our focus of the Established Population Control Grant is this pilot project, and our focus is really invasive species.
Carp's invasive.
Yeah, you know, I would
It can't hurt.
Yeah, it would be a tech question.
Yeah.
And we do work pretty closely with DNR throughout the process to make sure that we're all on the same page. So there's no surprises, that, you know, they understand where the match is coming from. And
You
it's
need to
okay
have
guys.
Ted at your meetings, not me. I don't do those grants.
How come you always come up with the money though? I
Don't you be
understand.
asking that.
It's a tooth fairy.
No, seriously though, this project, you have the benefit of, we've spent North American Wetland Conservation Act money here, NAWCA. We spent NRDA, Natural Resource Damage Assessment money here. We've been successful. We've done what we said we were going to do with the money in both cases. So you have a good track record with those huge funding sources. So,
And,
we're okay.
yeah, and the message I received from Fish and Wildlife Service last night is they really like, you know, long-term projects, and they like kind of funding it in phases and giving a little bit of money every year, is what I was told by Fish and Wildlife Service. So this really fits in well with what you guys are trying to do.
We've made it, I think, in a wandering fashion through the 3 bullets underneath the lake management plan discussion. Is there any subjects that we haven't approached at this time on the topic that anybody would like to inquire about or discuss further? I've got one contractual question for you at the end of this segment, Melissa, but I guess I just open it up from there just for open discussion.
I wonder, would you consider, or is there a need to have like a subcommittee that deals with identifying what the pilot project might look like?
I certainly believe there's benefit to it, and I'd be happy to be on it. I'd be interested to know if any other directors would be interested in such a thing, because as you're going to have needs, you know, I'm going to be looking to get on the phone and talk to you guys and interested public about satisfying those needs. But if we had a team set up tonight to say, hey, this is kind of the first group that things are gonna go through, and we might go this way or that way depending, I'd support that. Who would be interested in being on that team with me?
So what are we gonna be doing?
Yeah, that was my question.
Well, there's decisions to be made about what this pilot project looks like. How much money do we want to spend? You know, where's the match coming from? So that, rather than it being a full board decision, would it be appropriate if it was a smaller group to sort of expedite it? Because we may want to have this ironed out before your next meeting.
That was my comment on the bulk of the writing is gonna happen before our fall meeting.
Because that will be put into this management plan that needs to be developed before your October meeting. So there needs to be some decisions made about, you know, what this pilot project looks like, what's the purpose, what's the need, where is it gonna occur?
Is this pilot the first grant, or is this the aquatic invasive species grant?
Yeah, the
or-
pilot project is this one. It's the first one listed in my,
Okay. Just so I get it
Yep.
on the same page. I'll be on it if you want.
Okay? Art,
I'll be on it.
Art, Doug, and Seth? Anybody else interested?
How many you got?
4?
How many do you want?
Maybe
Whatever. If everybody wants to be on it, we can convene, have a phone call, conference call, or whatever we need to do it, even if it's more than just a couple guys right here.
A bunch of us all live within 10 minutes of each other anyway.
Yeah, pretty easy. Go to one log cabin or
Get the
whatever.
majority of us in a room pretty
Yeah.
quick.
you can put me down, but I have like 2 weeks, I'm not gonna be here in September. Maybe longer.
Okay.
We'll be meeting right away.
Well, we should be meeting much sooner than that.
Most of it would be
Yeah.
August.
Yeah.
That's my May-K time.
And it's probably not gonna be a sit 2 hours straight kind of thing. It'll be.
no, I think that we'll probably work with you a little more closely to figure out what this is, what this pilot project looks like, and then we can present it to the committee and get buy-in and just make sure that it's agreeable to everybody.
Because the decisions we're gonna make are gonna drive the lake plan that you're gonna prepare for us for the October meeting, which we need for the invasive species grant application.
It will drive the management plan, not the lake plan, so the aquatic invasive species.
The management plan,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah, and this is going to be like a management plan light, so it'll be I think once we have the money to update the lake management plan, there'll be a more robust aquatic invasive species plan in there, but this is going to be kind of a quick and dirty, or as quick and dirty as Ted will allow it to be, or just enough to secure the money for the pilot project.
I kind of have a question for everybody. Does anybody actually have anybody they want to contact as part of a financial partner in this? Like, do any of you guys have any openings or any leads on a group that might be willing to help us out? And the reason I ask is because if we all think about, a couple of different groups and they get 3 or 4 people coming and asking, that tends to be annoying. So I kind of want, if somebody has somebody in mind, maybe they should volunteer to talk to them or hit them up so that we don't have 3 or 4 people going, the same groups, same organizations.
Yeah, I agree. We should be coordinated on that with the 5 of us to make that list that we're gonna go for. Like for one, talking to Brian Glinzinski, the state biologist for Ducks Unlimited. I spoke to Mike Brumley at Webster's on Saturday at the tail end of our Brat fry, and he said, Brian's your guy. Talk to Brian about ways that you can work together with him. So, making that reach out, whether it's a couple of us or a couple of us and you, Melissa, or whatever, just making sure we have a good first touch and a concise message to carry. So I guess I would put that as an action item that I'll get started, because I've got a couple ideas on that one to make that list. And if you have parties that we should be talking to, that you'd like us to talk to, and feed those to me. And if you have a proposed who would make that contact point, feed that to me also. And I guess I would just suggest that whatever that list is, don't don't talk to anybody until you get the green light from the Art, Seth, Gary, Doug, me subcommittee to go for it, because we don't want 4 people hitting up the same people.
The town and the county come to mind as fiscal partners. I don't think you're gonna be able to just go to them and say, hey, can you give us money? But it would be nice, you know, they must do their budgeting in November for the following year, so it'd be great to get a line item in their budget for the subsequent year. That would help on other grants. They usually require a lot of lead time.
Seth, I didn't mean to steal your thunder there.
No, that was good, that's what I was getting at.
Okay. Okay. Okay, one contractual question, Melissa, and I apologize, because when you sent, and this, I'm talking about the spraying contract that I shared with everybody. The way it's written, and you called this out in your email, Melissa, was it combines both the grant planning and implementation work of the more significant restoration project, and it combines that with the 2018 potential project that we're talking about tonight. Is there a way that we could detangle those two? Because the challenge that I have is some of the terminology, and I get it contractually, you can't specify everything, but any ambiguity in there, I feel I struggle to understand what it's talking about, just because of, if we're talking about this meeting tonight, is this a time materials basis as it relates to the spraying project that you're visiting us, or is it on a gratis basis for the lake planning discussion, right? So
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we've got a clear delineation of what we're agreeing to, because one of the things we resolved for is we weren't going to be spending any money out of the treasury on the lake planning side this year. It was very much that we developed the grants without specifically spending any money. If we do need to spend money, we can do it. We just need to know that the meter's running and what we're buying. But for the other project, we totally understand if you're doing a 2018 project that we're paying for out of pocket, we totally get it. That would be something we're paying for now.
Yeah, the tasks, the money that I have here for tasks 3 and 4 really are when guys are mobilizing to the field to actually do the treatment. So, and this includes none of my time. So if you would prefer them to be separate proposals, we can certainly do that. Or I can add a statement similar to what I just said, that my coordination is part of tasks 1 and 2 and are not tasks that we're seeking reimbursement for. Would you prefer them to be separated?
I think it would be beneficial just to eliminate any possible confusion.
Sure.
And I don't know there's a lot of rework, because it's a 6-page document that was a pretty easy read with 2 pages of terms, which I doubt will change. I'm sure it'll be the same terms that'll be attached to each.
Yep.
It's just I don't want to walk into well, this paragraph actually applied to both things as opposed to just the one thing you thought it was.
Yeah, and this was at the suggestion, I actually didn't have those initial tasks of the proposal, and it was at the suggestion of some other folks to put them in. So I can take them out, and then and then I'll get back to you at least right away the proposal that has tasks 3 and 4, so that you guys can vote on that, and then I'll follow up with tasks 1 and 2
Okay.
in a separate proposal. Does that make sense?
Sure, that would make sense. And I don't know that splitting it in 2 precludes us from discussing the merits of the North Channel spraying project tonight and voting to proceed or not proceed on it.
And can I just mention, I don't know if it was clear to you, but I separated, the permitting from the actual implementation in case you wanted to do the permitting yourself.
Yeah,
And
I think.
that would be something that wouldn't, you could, that expense then is not part of Stantec's.
Yep. Nope. I saw that.
Okay. And one thing that also has changed since I wrote this is we determined that At present, without the trucks are, we really do not have the right equipment to get in that channel, and you and I discussed that over the weekend. You know, we don't have the right motor, so we had discussed potentially using your equipment and your service to guide the boat, which would then in turn reduce the task force costs.
That sounds nice.
We potentially wouldn't even need 2 people, we would need just 1. So in theory, it could cut that cost in half. Don't quote me on that, I'd like to consult folks that would actually want to do it, but that's just, I don't know that it would take 3 people on the boat to do what we were originally planning on doing.
Right. Yep.
Melissa, can you give some details on just how you do that? You take a boat, you're spraying from some type of a boom, or somebody standing there with wands?
Actually,
how fast do you travel?
Can we save that for the later part of the meeting, just to have a
That's fine.
clean break on that? Because otherwise we'll get into deliberation and we just love to cover off a couple agenda topics before it becomes 9:30 and we say, oh my gosh, we haven't even
I see.
covered the other
Okay.
stuff.
So knowing what I just said, do you want me to kind of present a whole new proposal with modified costs that would reflect, you know, your involvement more?
Yeah, I mean, that would be beneficial. I looked at your rate sheets and I don't know that it's a huge difference. Like it'll be something, but I don't know that it turns 4,000 into 1,500 or anything like that. So I guess whatever, we'll get there when we get there later in the meeting, just to talk about the fee side. Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Does anybody else have any questions, comments, or concerns on the Lake Management Plan discussion? The key takeaways so far, and we're an hour into our meeting, is we're making good progress. We're definitely entering the grant writing part of the process. We have a subcommittee set up of 5 of us to fulfill needs that Stantec will have as they write the grant applications, which we'll be turning a first pass over to Ted Johnson for his feedback later this fall. In addition to that, the decision making by the subcommittee will address other topics that need to be addressed, such as funding sources, matches, and kind of go whatever direction we need to, so that we're opening the right channels for discussion with parties. The expectation is grant awards will receive notice in early 2019 that we receive them, and we'll be initiating projects on the lake, including planning and implementation work to control cattail and other invasive, potentially in 2019 on Rush Lake. That summary sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Excellent. Well, if nothing further, we'll move on to the other update part of our agenda, with the first item being water level management on the lake. Ron, would you just give us a brief update on where the lake is at, please?
Sure. I guess if we go back to our April meeting, at that time the water level was 1.7 on the gauge, 1.4 being the target. Continued to be 1.7 through the end of April. My attempts to somewhat tweak it and get headed toward 1.4 were, anyway, stayed at 1.7. In early May we had 5 to 6 inches of rain, and at that time we had a lot of debris on the bog diverter and also right in front of the dam, and I was concerned that another heavy rain event we might not be able to get water that we needed to out of the lake. So we had the county highway department, and this was an expense that the town of Nepieskin covers. Usually it's about $700 or $800 to clean the bog diverter, clean other bogs that are in front of the dam gates and so on. So we did that on May 10th. Typically we do that more kind of at this time of the summer, but again, the situation was such that I felt we should do it a little bit earlier. After that, the water level continued to proceed down. The second half of May was quite dry. We're at, actually on June 7th, we were at 1.3, caught me a little bit by surprise, but closed some gates, got it back up. Then we ended, we got into more mid-June. We had another 5-inch rain event, and so the water level got up to 1.8. stayed there through about the end of June. Early July 2nd, we were at 1.65. The last time I was down there was July 10th at 1.4. I set the gates right at the water level, so basically right now I would expect that there's very little water exiting the dam other than the leakage that we have in between the gates. So hopefully we'll get some more rain tomorrow and go through the summer, and hopefully we can maintain the level at our target of 1.4. It's up to Mother Nature. So,
As it
largely.
usually is.
yes.
How is the structure of the dam? Are the
Meaning,
gates okay?
does it look sound? Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Very much so. I think it's fine.
What were your, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It appears that the telephone pole that goes across, it's rolled under a little bit, it used to be over. So when you do go under a boat, you can go over it now. I know it's to stop debris, and it still does, but it's just, was that done on purpose, or?
No, it just kind of happened to get a little lower level. Now, there's some wires underneath that is supposed to catch bogs that want to go under it. I don't know if that's pulled it down a little bit, but being a little bit lower in the water, I feel it's actually more effective than it used to be.
Yeah.
So it's a bit different than it used to be, but it's working well.
Sure. Just noticed it. and thought-
There's quite a few bogs on it right now, and those may stay there until almost next summer. But we could clean them if need be, if I feel we need to. But I think we're okay. You know.
Just a little note with the 8 Mile Creek. I was down today and looked at ours, and we have good flow. There's good flow there. You can, not rushing, because I think maybe some of them high waters must have done something with the weeds, that they're not as staggering, as stagnant as it before, where there would be just a little trail going through. It seems to be a much broader flow going through.
Let me make a comment. The
Yes,
weeds were
please.
getting really bad in the 8 Mile Creek just before that last heavy rain. And it kind of shortened our weed potential. We're probably in half or more. It took them all out.
Good for you.
I'd like to thank Ron, because the way you took water out this time, we didn't get the flooding that we used like we did the year before. It just seemed that way.
I don't know if I did anything much different, but
Good job, Ron.
You're welcome.
Take it when you get
let's move on.
One comment on water levels, and it was along the way people have commented to me on a belief that the lake may not be at levels that the lake was at before, and I don't really know any different because I moved to the area in 2008 and was here very casually before then. But the one thing that piqued my interest that sort of resonated with their comments was the mean sea level of the dam has an inconsistency. In the historical dam water level reporting that came from Michelle Hayes of the DNR, there's one set of mean sea level information, and in the plans for the construction of the new dam, a different mean sea level maximum was used, which is certainly interesting and could be right or wrong. And it could indicate that, yes, the dam might be at a different level than what it was expected to be, or everything's fine and invasive cattail has just really been doing it. Ron was able to provide me with some information that was from around 2010 or so on transferring the benchmark from the old dam to the new dam. And what I've been able to successfully do is take the benchmark as it's placed on the new dam and reconcile it to within, it's less than half an inch from where the water level is expected to be. Said differently, while there's an inconsistency in mean sea level in the old dam water level reporting and the new dam construction materials, the levels at which the new dam is maintaining water is consistent with historical norms, and the difference in mean sea level is just an anomaly. The conclusion I draw from finding the benchmark, measuring it to the water level, and reconciling it to historical detail is the new dam was constructed properly, assuming the benchmark was affixed at the same elevation as it was removed from, which if you could use a transit, you can do. So assuming that, the lake's as full as it ever was back when compared to the water level records. So when we look at pictures of the lake and say this used to be water pre-restoration and now it's just a mat of cattail, a hypothesis that, well, maybe the water is just artificially lower and that's why you don't see it. The water level's the same or more than it was before. The only difference is Ron can let it out of the dam more effectively than anybody could with the old dam before. So in short, much ado about nothing, but for the benefit of consistency, I was able to tie that out within half an inch. So very pleased with that.
Just before we started that project on that, I took our survey equipment down there. And before and after, I put a stake in that nobody knew about. And I had just a little under an inch difference. But that's the first time I heard that verified. I didn't know that.
Yep. So I just did it yesterday. So okay, so that concludes the water level report. If nobody else has any questions or comments, we'll move on to just a brief part about the south pier. I know we left off, we're expecting one to come along. Seth, Ellen, do you guys have any insight on when we might be seeing that?
I'll have to call him. This dropped off my radar. I don't even know what. It's in the process. I just don't know where it is.
Who's heading that on? Is that, or who's
I
taking
think
care
it's
of it?
Mr. Olson,
Okay.
the guy that we met out there, right? I don't remember.
I saw there were some paint marks down there now, so I don't know if they were doing some surveying to figure out where they were gonna put it or what, but there's a bunch of paint marks down there right by the boat landing, just off to the left of the boat landing, so I was assuming they were probably getting ready or figuring out where it was gonna go.
Nobody called me, but I was gone all last week, so. Steve Easterly doesn't work here anymore. That technician position's moving to Horicon. You got me. And then we'll bring Rachel in now. I think I'll bring the biologist in because her work got changed, so she'll be coming more often to give you biological stuff. But Ted's your person to do this grant stuff because I don't do that.
Right.
As far as the rest of the work on that boat landing, we're gonna do a little bit more clearing and leveling and stuff like that, but we wanna do that right before winter. Just because then it'll have all winter to settle and then it won't be a sloppy, nasty mess in the spring.
There won't be any deer flies.
What did you say, Gary?
And there won't be any deer flies.
Aren't those lovely?
Oh, they're terrible.
Okay.
Brett, I'll email you if I find out anything in the next week on that project. I don't know.
Sure. And I think the thing that's really nifty about the project is it will be noticed, and with our broader lake planning thing getting off the ground, having a pier, although it's unrelated and its own separate thing, it'll get noticed, and I think it'll help get our lake planning thing noticed too. So.
Guess it's a match.
No,
It's not in the grant period.
Has to be in the grant period.
Yeah, I thought of that too. No, it's not.
Maybe Seth pulling it out in or putting it back in spring and pulling it out
Yeah,
next winter.
I
might
could
come.
charge a couple $1,000 there.
Yeah. Nancy?
What are we hoping,
I
hoping to have it put in?
I don't even know if it's
Oh,
done
no.
yet. I'll let you know too, but I'm not gonna find it out tomorrow.
That's fine. Just the next time we meet, we'll be fully into waterfowl season, so if
That's what I was
somebody,
just wondering.
it's on the agenda, because if somebody asks somebody, hey, when's that happening, at least we could say, well, we talked about it.
I don't know where it is.
With any luck, it'll be before duck season.
You know, if it happens next spring, at least it's gonna happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, just thinking that if by some miracle, it were like during the duck season, you just got so many people that are noticing it and are just maybe getting excited then for the next, for
You
what
know-
we're looking at.
You know what I promise? Somebody will be complaining about how it's built.
Right? Just put a big sign.
It should have been
Absolutely.
wider, it should have been this, it should have been that.
Yep. Why'd you point it that way? That was a 30-minute topic the day that we had that
They should
done.
have come to the meetings.
Yep,
I wanted the wood going this way, not that way.
right,
It'll be built
Can't
ADA.
please everybody.
yep.
If you're
Okay.
5 miles from home, you're an expert, remember that?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so thank you, Seth and Ellen, for the comments on the pier. We'll move on then to North Launch Channel spraying. So I've got a couple brief remarks, and then we'll just go into open dialogue on the topic. That subject was brought up at our January meeting as an original idea for something that we could pursue this year to help improve navigability and prevent the channel from growing shut. The notes that I have from the meeting don't identify who that advocate was, but to check on the navigability of the channel, I went in the channel 2 separate times in the last 2 weeks. The first time was with a 14-foot John boat with a small long-tail mud motor. Driving to the North Channel was no navigational concern other than the extreme curviness of the channel. So thank you, Google Maps. Highly recommend using that if you're going on the channel, because there are some dead ends that come off of it. In my trip back home, my drive shaft let loose on my motor, and I had the joy of push-pulling back to the North Launch from a good distance. And the channel was very navigable with a 14-foot John boat and nothing other than a push-pull. Smaller craft would have had no trouble. There's plenty of water in there, and there wasn't any excessive vegetation in the water that prevented navigation, nor was the vegetation on the side of the channel encroaching on the, making it too narrow to travel, so to speak. This past weekend, Melissa and I went out on the lake, and I took some pictures of the channel. That time I took my bigger craft, which I cannot turn around by jumping out of the boat and getting in the water with waders because it's too heavy, because I felt safe. And we had no challenge getting to the North Launch either in that boat, basically just idling the whole way with a larger motor that I had on that boat. I did take pictures of that, and I took the liberty of posting them on our Facebook page, and I sent all of you who have internet an email indicating where you could find those and see them for yourself. Some of the patches were wider. There were also some of the narrower ones that were getting up on the boat, but certainly it was about a boat's width was as narrow as it got. In summary, my view on it, the original predicate for the 2018 project of improving navigability and preventing it from growing shut, I didn't see it growing shut, and the channel was as I remembered it was from 2 years ago, which was the last time I was down it. So we could spray it this year. It certainly would kill off vegetation. What I wonder about it, though, is how doing that project would work as far as grant scoring goes, if it's totally irrelevant to what we'd be doing on the grant applications, or if it's, hey, you're going to do pilot projects in this area of the lake and you've already done a project this last year, if that's something you could take a bow for and that makes your application look better. I'm not asking you, Ellen, I'm asking the board and Melissa for consideration on this, because in my personal view, spraying it, it'll provide no benefit this year, because the cattail's going to go dormant this fall, and you won't see any impact this year. Because cattail, it sucks the herbicide into the rhizome as it hibernates in late summer, and then it doesn't grow back next year because the rhizome was killed by the herbicide. So we won't see any benefit from it this year, and we would next year.
But isn't that the case every time?
That's the case every time. But if we're going for pilot project money on the lake next year, you could conceivably say this is part of what we want to go for in the pilot project because it helps ensure movement.
Public accessibility.
Yeah, so you could potentially include it in a grant application next year. We could get ahead of it and just say, you know what, we'll get it done. Maybe it helps us with the grant applications. Maybe it helps us get equipment into the area if we're going to be doing work in there. And I, just my own personal opinion is I expect we will be in the north end of the lake because there is exposed seed bank today with the water level at the upper end of the range. You can see it. And also it's one of the largest opportunities in the lake to make a meaningful impact. So I'm kind of indifferent on it. So I'd like more comments from Melissa on the grant side and whatnot. But if anybody else has any other questions or comments on it, I'd encourage your remarks now and save my stuff for the end.
If we get approved for grant money, and we wait till next year to spray, even if we pay out of pocket and spray, then that would count towards some of our match money though, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yep. So I think either way, we'd be better off to spray it next year. Whether we use it as a part of the grant or whether we use it as match money.
I'm not sure it gains you anything as far as, scoring on the grant that you've done a project, because you've already done projects out here. I mean, there's a history of doing projects.
Yeah, it sounds
Whether or
like-
not this
sounds
one
like we
makes-
should wait till next year.
Yeah, I think so too.
Channels are over there.
Yep.
And one thing is, my always the understanding of that north end was gonna be, if you really wanna go and launch a big boat, go to the east landing or something like that. That was gonna be more smaller equipment, smaller boats, skiffs. That was what that landing, in my understanding, unless I was all wrong.
Well, I got a 1648 I can smash through there, and I made it through all the way to the North Landing just fine. So.
Well, but what I'm saying though is, you
But you really wouldn't
don't need to
launch-
try to launch the Queen Mary out of
No,
it.
you could.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
No.
Why would you if we have public access?
Yeah.
For launching itself, in trailering my disabled 14-foot boat, I did find that the bunks didn't make it into the water, and that's it's not a big trailer, it's just a small little trailer. So even that, if you were launching a bigger boat, you'd have a real challenge unless you had good rollers on there or something. Smaller boat, you can muscle it off, but yeah, no, I think you're right on that one.
Yep.
And when I posted the thing on Facebook, there were a number of comments on it, like, nice mud boat, but what about the other boats? You can get anywhere in a mud boat. And the comment that I went back on was, no, this isn't for your monster boats. This is better suited for your smaller boats because getting stuck is a risk. If I beached my 16, I don't know what the width is, but if I beached my 16-footer, I'm not getting it turned around, and I don't know how I get somebody to pull me out of there. It'd be a real problem.
No, we had to get out and turn it around at the boat landing in order to go back the other way because there wasn't anywhere wide enough to turn it around at the channel.
Yeah, there are very few spots. So the comment that I put is like, this is not for your big pig mud boats. This is for, the little guys. And there's some neat stuff in there. Melissa, like you saw the lake from the south launch to the north launch. What's your view on biodiversity along that channel and some of those pockets that are in there compared to the rest of the lake?
Yeah, I was actually surprised to see the amount of natives coming up in the northern part. I was surprised to see in some of the treatment areas that we went past the diversity that's coming in after the cattails have been removed. It's a lot of early successional species, meaning species that you would see that come in really quickly after a site's been disturbed, but then they kind of fade out. But you could see there were a lot of sedges coming up, little sedges. So I think there's still a lot of diversity out there. I was happy to see that.
Melissa, you mentioned, or someone mentioned here that if, we provided a boat to do the spraying, and even if we had a method of a sprayer itself with a wand, and then having you get permits and having someone on board, that would reduce that bid by 10%.
what I had suggested is using someone else's boat, but then we would provide the tank, the sprayer, the staff with the license, with the appropriate licenses to do it. It's just, we don't have a mud motor, so, you know, we have a bigger boat. So, you know, once I saw that channel, we just don't have the right equipment.
So there could be maybe $1,000 or,
Yeah, and the biggest cost savings would likely be that we don't need 2 Stantec staff to do it. It was bid originally that one staff would be driving the boat, one would be doing the spraying, but if we're not driving the boat anymore, then really ultimately we only need 1 staff to be able to do the treatment, so that's the biggest cost savings.
well, that would certainly be a possibility with, even with Utah, you've got a fund out of that. We've got a couple in our family too.
Yeah, then that would be our money plus some of our volunteer time on it too.
Correct.
For the grant.
If we wait till the grant period.
Right.
Right.
But next year, we might approach it very differently. By next year, we'll have a truck SAR, we might think about access very differently next year, so. And I would think, next year, maybe there could be very strategic places where we do the pilot project that would include part of that northern channel. So, and I think that's something for the committee to discuss, is how to merge the 2 of them together in the most efficient way. Because I think there were areas of the channel where you really wouldn't need a spray. They were wide enough. There were some natives. We discussed some areas where I felt just a broadcast spray would kill a lot of natives and limited cattail, and I thought maybe some of those areas shouldn't be sprayed.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Make a motion to table
yeah, that sounds good.
That's second.
All right, motion made to table the spraying of the North Channel project for now. Motion made and seconded. All in favor of tabling this project to a later date? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so Melissa, we suppose we don't need 2. You could just skinny this down for the parts to pull out of there for the spraying of the channel, and then we'll address those on the grant work that we do next year and all that other documentation. Okay. Okay. We appreciate that, despite not proceeding today, we appreciate you presenting the proposal and giving us the tools we need to think through it, and also the helping us understand how it can fit into the broader project. So thank you.
And it's good for you to see our terms and conditions, so, because those would be the same that we would do when we actually have money. So if you have any concerns, questions about any of those, if you wanted to see any changes, those need to be routed through our legal department, which isn't a quick thing.
Yes, that makes sense. Okay. In regard to the contract as a whole, there was very little remarks that I had on it outside of detangling the 2 and just making sure there was a clean delineation. Just a couple comments, and if anybody else has them, I didn't have any real heartburn that says Melissa has to get her legal team working on it, but in the beginning, the task 1 on scope of services, that it wasn't anything that's irrelevant because we talked about it. Sorry, just one moment, please. Yeah. So in the grant funding, there's task 2. There's the final sentence. The client is under no obligation to secure Stantec services if grants are not awarded. And I understand, you're working on a volunteer basis right now, essentially, until we get grants approved. And part of that is once we get grants that you're going to be our partner as we work on that. The language that I'd like to see in some form in that task is an affirmation of the ability to use other contractors within the scope of services for purposes of the match. You know, like I said differently, if a university wants to show up and do work as a match, but you can do it for a price, I'd love to have the university show up and do it for a match as opposed to you for a price.
Yep, I agree.
Same thing if there's any unique novel planning or research or implementation capability. You mentioned, you know, having a contractor before. You know, there might be somebody who has a unique skill set that we'd want to talk to. Just making sure it's clear that we can get something special in on the project if it's out there.
Yeah, yeah. My understanding is, you know, you guys don't have to give Stantec all the money, so that's, I think I'd like to see you to see me as a partner, and this is an open discussion, so I fully support that and agree with that approach.
Okay. As far as everything else goes, I don't have any real other gripes on it other than just broadening that so that we can work with the right people at the right times to achieve what we're looking to do out here. Does anybody else have any other concerns with this? Otherwise, what I expect Melissa will do is she'll pull out the 2018 channel spraying piece, turn around a very similar document, and I will sign that in my authority as president, and we'll proceed.
Mr. Chairman, is there the type of herbicide the same as we used with the aerial, or will they be furnishing something different?
Your proposal used a trade name that I'd never seen before, Melissa, and in a separate conversation, I know you asked about what had been done before, whether it was rodeo, which I forget what that is. What's rodeo?
It's a glyphosate.
Glyphosate, or if it was imazepam or some other one that started with an I.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, Bob, I don't know what chemical we'll use, because you could imagine that if we used glyphosate or the one that starts with an I, you might get a different result. So I think that's all something to be determined later, whether it needs to be in a grant application by the subcommittee, or if it's something where that's like too far in the weeds and that's something that gets figured out when the project is up and running in 2019. Does that make sense, or did I
I'm
miss
just
your question?
concerned that we haven't really seen a great improvement of killing it off, and it might be an advantage to try something different or something new that they've had some success with.
Well, I hope to get that information. I don't know if that's in the documents you sent me or the ones you gave to Brat, because it would be nice to understand what chemical was used where and in what concentration. So I'll try and pull that information out of
Well, they're dying when they're sprayed.
Yeah. And the difference between imazepyr and glyphosate is imazepyr isn't like, it's not a contact killing agent like glyphosate is. So imazepyr is, it inhibits the growth, like the stem and shoot growth of next year. But imazepyr has a much longer residual time in the soil, so it'll kill all the other natives as well that might germinate afterwards. So for that reason, we sometimes don't use imazepyr because of its long residual life. But it'd be good to know what was used on other treatment areas.
Okay. Does that work, Bob?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So I suppose that concludes that part of other updates on the spraying the North Launch channel this year. We'll table that to later and look to see how we can work that into the grant and work to be done in 2019. Next item is summer controlled burn prospects. This is one where Seth originally made this suggestion earlier this year, where why are we talking about burning in winter when we could see the dead cattail right there? It's white, and why can't we just burn it now and prevent it? Before we met with Ellen and Ted, Melissa and Aaron Fegestad and I talked about the topic, and Aaron went on probably a 5 minutes coverage of all the potential issues that could be in place. In this U.S. Fish and Wildlife leaflet on controlling cattail with fire, there's maybe a more concise way to read it, so I'll just read this really quick. Local concern with the effects of fire on air quality can be substantial. Fire prescriptions for cattail marshes should not solely address fire control, but the ecological effects of fires at different intensities, at different seasons, and under different environmental conditions. Moreover, planned fires must be combined with water management that ultimately controls the cattails. So to sum it up even more than that, there's a lot of different variables to that would be difficult to overcome in a quick basis this year. Would the dead cattail burn now? Yes. Can you burn green cattail? There's U.S. Fish and Wildlife that does burn green cattail. It is more challenging, but they do green cattail burns in the summer, which does result in much worse air quality than dead or dormant cattail burns. So long story short, we certainly could, but there are way too many challenges to overcome in a fashion for this year right now. Melissa, do you have anything else to add on that?
No, I think that's true. I think getting access to make sure that the burn is secure and safe is another challenging issue.
See, I didn't realize that you could actually get green cattails to burn. I guess my thought was, if we sprayed an area last year, now this coming year, when all the other cattails start to green up nice, I just assumed you could go in and burn the dead spots, and it wouldn't go on to the green areas. Maybe is that a false assumption?
I think given enough fuel and heat, there's no
It'll keep
potential there.
going.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a risk, so
I
you
don't
wouldn't
know
want it to get away on you.
if this is
Right.
off topic, but I actually believe it's good habitat for migrating waterfowl. I don't know why we would burn it.
Just speaking from Melissa and my boat tour, at one of the spots along the North Channel, there's one of the spray areas. There's several along the channel, but we stopped at one, and I jumped out and dug a plug out of the floating cattail bog to show Melissa how. Guess what? You could spray it, but you've got 8 inches of root mat that's floating here that's preventing that seed bank from doing anything. And when I got out to do that, I found wad after wad after wad, which means people are having success hunting over these spray areas because there wouldn't be that kind of wads just perched up on top from pre-restoration.
They rest in those areas and they feel safe because the hawks can't get in. Whatever it is, they rest in those areas. I don't know if they're nesting. Seen them nesting. Well,
I didn't see
we're
anything
past
like
that now.
And like the wheat fields now, once that wheat's off, those ducks will be in there just thinking.
That's just I've observed that.
Well, the thing is too, you do a burn in the wintertime, people are closed up because it's wintertime. You aren't gonna have all your windows open. You do that now, and people are outside trying to enjoy the outdoors and have their windows and all that open. So you're just causing more problems as far as getting people ticked off at you.
Well, wouldn't you take your resources and burn live cattails that are just dormant and dry, rather than burning already dead cattails?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Both are used.
What's that?
Burning both alive and dormant and sprayed and dead.
Isn't the point of burning the sprayed and dead to kill the root mass underneath? Because you've already killed the plant, but the root mass underneath is still alive?
The root
Is
mass
that-
is very difficult to burn because of moisture.
But-
That's Steve Lentz said it'd be easier to dry out a camel, or I forget what Steve said, but it was basically that effect. Like you can't get it dry enough to burn that stuff out.
It's gotta reach a certain temperature for a certain amount of minutes in order to kill that.
Looks like peat, kind of burn out peat moss.
See, that's one thing you'd have to, in summer, if you had any dry land that could have peat on it, you would not want to burn. As I have experienced years ago, and it's one son of a gun to put that peat fire out. You can spend years putting that peat fire out. You do not want to burn if there's any peat exposed.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife regulations say Minnesota regulations prohibit deburning of peat. You can't do it. So,
Problem. I'm just saying it's
So if there's any,
peat,
you
it's
know,
not-
if you're burning over water, might be a wonderful thing, but if you're gonna be any place where it could be dry, and if there's any peat, I don't know if there's any peat out there or not, but from my own personal experience, years ago, our almost whole farm, 8 Mile Creek, was nothing but cattails. I have experience with it, it was as far as you could see, cattail. And we found out the hard way, burning when it was dry, it was quite a chore.
It's quite an experience. If we were walking out years ago when I was young, I was walking out in the marsh one time on the southwest corner, and I fell into a peat burn. It was about a 9-foot drop. Had a hard time getting back out again.
That's
I
wild.
would think.
You know, I mean,
There's stories about people losing cattle.
Good thing you're young and spry there, right?
It wasn't still burning either.
yeah. Okay, so not going to happen now, but burning is certainly one of the most commonly used tools for managing cattail, and is on my short list of things to be discussing with the subcommittee and Stantec as we work forward and grant applications. Okay, next item on the other updates is water quality monitoring. I have done 2 samples to date, one being on May 20th I was on the lake, and the other one being June 25th I was on the lake. We did receive the lake management, I misspoke, the Citizen Lake Monitoring Program, which is covering the southern site, which is by the deep hole of Rush Lake, to the south of Island Air Road, where I live. And the results that we received are roughly consistent with last year and are relatively good. So to share the north location, chlorophyll A, which is the amount of chlorophyll A found in the water, is scored a 3, which is very good with the DNR. With the information they provided, they give me an entire training manual on everything you wanted to know about this stuff, and it's pretty interesting. So that's a good score. In the So I'm sorry, that was the north site. The north site was a 3 for chlorophyll A, and the south site for chlorophyll A on June 25th was 7, which is still good by DNR standards. So that's a good indication of algal growth, that it's not problematic. Phosphorus, which is the food that it enjoys to eat, the reading for that was 0.0263, which lists out as good by DNR standards. And also on the south landing, it was 0.0517, which was the bottom of the fair category. So that was another good result. Those were consistent with prior year. Looking back at the May samples, the south for phosphorus was less than 3, so that was good again. And the south site was 0.059, which is at the bottom of fair to the high poor category of phosphorus, which may be consistent with needing to understand the inputs into the lake better. Either way, not a bad score, but indicative of nutrient loading that we need to keep an eye on. With the water samples, Secchi disc did go down to the bottom. That's the black and white checkered circle. And the southern site, I'm in about 4 feet of water. That site does look kind of murky because of kicked up sediments, just because it's in a fair amount of open water. And the Secchi disc had no problem being visible on the bottom, despite that. And at the north site, it's very clear water. Both spots are tinged brown, but that one, it's no challenge to get down to the bottom. That's about 3.5 feet of water. In regard to understanding the nutrient loading, on May 3rd, meeting with Ted Johnson, We spoke about understanding that part of the lake better, water inflows and phosphorus that's coming from it. Ted got me in contact with Dave Bolha. He's their streams and rivers guy. And Dave has identified 4 sites that we could go out and sample from, where we'd be sampling for phosphorus, which is a $25 test. As far as protocol goes, as far as timing, if how many we would look to do, you know, with the lake monitoring, it's simple. End of May, end of June, end of July, end of August, that's what it is. But that I would expect there's a little different approach. We're looking to meet with Dave to understand what protocols he would be looking for us to use to collect those additional samples. Because like I certainly could go and get the samples myself. I have the equipment to do it today. It's a bottle with a little bit of acid that I pour in there to stabilize it, and then take it to the state lab of hygiene. And $25 later, you have a phosphorus test that's been completed. But I certainly want to make sure if we're doing that, it fits into the protocol that the DNR sets forward, and it fits into our lake monitoring, grant planning framework that we're in the process of developing. So we all seemed on the same page on May 3rd that we wanted to proceed with that. What I don't know right now is how we proceed. That's something that Melissa and I can get more information from Dave Bolha on here yet this summer. So if there are sampling opportunities, I could go execute them and get that information, which helps us understand the lake better. The question is, if I do that, do we want to do that? And what that means is it's $25 a test. 4 sites, 2 of them are on the east side near Mountain Road. As Mountain Road heads west towards the lake and then it turns north to connect into County Highway E, there's 2 sites on the west. There's a site at Henderson Creek, and there's also a site on, no, that's County Highway M, I'm sorry, that Mountain Road connects to. And the other site is on County Highway E, kind of up in this neck of the woods, where the water crosses E and into the watershed. So what I would propose is, if we're serious about this, that we resolve for a certain amount of money to be spent to begin collecting phosphorus samples that support information gathering to better understand nutrient loading in the watershed. And my comment to all of you is that I'll be working with Melissa and Dave Bolha and Ted Johnson to the extent that we need to make sure that it's being done in a fashion that supports the broader initiatives that we're setting forth with redeveloping the lake management plan and implementing control mechanisms within the watershed of cattails and bolstering native plant populations. I don't know how many times I might need to go out and sample, but I would venture to guess it wouldn't be more than 4 times yet this year. 4 times $25 a sample times 4 sample sites would be $400 would be the footprint I'm
Make a motion to approve.
Todd, you're making a motion to approve
4 samples.
4 samples at up to 4 sites, so for a total price tag of
200?
$400. $25 times 4 sites. 4 sites makes $100 up to 4 events. So motion for $400.
Second.
And Art seconds it. $400 for 4 sites, up to 4 instances at $25. $25 and a sample. And that's a good number because the first phosphorus test bill came in just the other day, and it was $25 for phosphorus alone. So that should stand.
Can I throw something in here?
Yes, please.
Maybe you should think about holding off, or at least reserving 1 set of samples to when after we may have a heavy rain, so you get an idea what's running off of the land and what's running in there versus, you know, during a dry period or something like that. You could come out with a whole different regimen as far as what your results are.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, and that was the comment that I made in that May 3rd meeting, because we had I don't know how much rain we got that night into the day after, but I remember saying to Ted, I've got the phosphorus bottles right now. I can go down to Henderson Creek and take these things in the morning when we're getting hammered and all that water's running into the lake. And he didn't say anything about that, but I think you're probably right, because that's where it comes from.
I'm not against the testing at all, and it's an interesting thing, but have you ever thought of, what if you do have a phosphorus spike at different times? What are you gonna do?
It's all TBD. I know certain programs, there's grant funding available that can be used to help create, I don't know the technical sciencey term for it, but basically holding ponds to collect that rainwater at the periphery of the lake until it can dissipate and that phosphorus drops out. And those are things where land can be purchased, and that can be done with grant funds. I know I've seen that done elsewhere. So I guess once we know we have a problem and where we can determine it's coming from, then we look to solutions on that. You know, like with the prior project, there was all this money that came in that worked for land acquisition. You know, that's possibly another option. If water's coming in at a certain place, you buy some acreage there to impound that water until it can seep into the ground instead of just run into the lake. That's a big way you can fix that.
Plus you have those like green buffer areas and that too. That's, years ago you brought in all of that stuff to us about, you know, what was going on like more towards the northern end of Horicon Marsh and all that. And it's all tying back in now.
Kevin?
Fred.
Yep.
If I recall, phosphorus is being brought into your system through the sediment.
Phosphorus exists in the lake sediments, and it comes in through runoff as well.
But usually phosphorus is tied to the runoff with the soil
Yes.
particles. Now, another question is, how is the septic systems around the lake? Because you can have a phosphorus coming off some of your septic systems off the lake too.
Yeah. I guess those are all things that I don't know the answer to, but we'll talk to Dave Bullhog, because I'm sure there's septic systems on plenty of other lakes that have.
I don't know what Winnebago County is like now, but I know Fond du Lac County, as far as the Town of Ripon is concerned, you have to have your septic system pumped and inspected and tested every other year now. Every 3 years.
Winnebago is the same.
And I know that there's a lot of people down by where my house is, their property doesn't perk, they have holding tanks.
Because I know there's been a few problems on Green Lake this year where the beaches were closed. I don't know if you heard that with E. coli and stuff. Now there's speculation that some of this stuff is coming from ducks. Is that a possibility, Melissa? But
I used to hear stuff complaining about a lot of seagulls.
Kill all them
E.
animals.
coli comes from the species.
And the fish, they poop.
And the fish.
Just get fishing.
And quit farming that stuff and we'd all be better off.
You know, I guess that, you know, the thing is though, is you gotta have good science to come up with an idea what what your diagnosis is, and then the science to mitigate it. So this is the first part of collecting for the science of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to know what it is.
Right.
No matter who it implicates, it doesn't, I mean, you know where it's coming.
Maybe there's nothing we can do about it, but at least we can know about it.
Right. Okay, so there's a motion made and seconded, and if there's no further debate, then we'd go forward to vote. Motion is for up to $400 for 4 sites for 4 instances at $25 a phosphorus test to sample water inputs coming out of the lake. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. No other questions on water quality monitoring. We move on to Brat, and fundraising. First off, thank you everybody who came out and worked. We had a really great turnout, and the weather held off too. So thank you, Mother Nature, for not raining on our parade. Had a nice day. Talked to some very interested people on the lake, and I think we had a good time. Thank you. Seth, I don't know if anybody noticed, but with Seth's help, we got the Brat fry listed in the Ripon Commonwealth, so helped get some visibility on it there. And overall performance of the Brat fry is we sold roughly 6% more on, or we made roughly 6% more on food and beverage sales. And that number was, we made $502.71 on food and beverage sales. We received $375 in donations. There was $125 in donation jars, and my wife Tracy and I donated $250 to it with the spirit of the 2/3, 1/3 grant match program from the state for a total of $375. If nobody has any questions on the Brat fry, I guess I'd close the book on that one for now. Another successful event that overall achieved a net profit of $877.71 for the organization, which when we apply that towards grant match, that'll fund $2,500 worth of management efforts on the lake going forward. So good bang for the buck there. Okay. Second, I got this in the mail today on fundraising. This was mentioned to me while I was waiting in line to sign up for the Brat fry at Webster's a couple years ago. And this came to our organization from the Green Bay Packers. Their food service company has volunteers who work the food booths and vending at Packer games. And there's opportunities for groups like ours to work those events and get a portion of the sales that are generated by those booths. If there's interest in working that, I'd love to get the ball rolling on this. They've got an initial planning meeting Tuesday, July 31st that they're inviting me to understand how the program works and go from there. I don't know anything other than it would be selling concessions basically at a Packer game, and I imagine it wouldn't be that much of watching the Packer game, but I'm sure you're taking it in since you're at Lambeau Field. So I'm curious what interest there is in this, because if there is interest, I will happily go to this and figure out what it means and figure out what we can do about it. I don't know anything about commitment or dates or times or any of that, but I think it's you can volunteer as much as you want or as little as you want based on the comments that I received from the guy that I was waiting in line behind at Webster's.
Yeah, that'd be great if you went to it. That's all what it is.
I mean, I will. What I'm looking for is other directors to beat their chest and say, I will work that Packer game. If I get a good date that works for me, I would do it. Because I can go and get information about anything, but if I'm a lone guy doing it, I'm not doing it, Doug.
Or members of the audience.
Or
members of the audience.
Although I've just been informed that I will be babysitting for said people that would possibly be doing this.
I can't help you with that.
That must be her match.
Yeah, you're the match.
So just, I'm not looking to write anything in blood, but like just general consensus, show of hands, like who could see themselves in this room maybe working an event like that? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I've got 9. That's enough for me to leave the house and find out more information. This is July 31st. I'm expecting with football season starting preseason in mid-August that they're going to be looking to move quickly. So what I'll do is get on the horn with everybody after this to discuss what it looks like, and just can I see the show of hands again, please? Okay.
It's
Thank you.
probably a Sunday. Could be a
Or a Monday.
Thursday.
Or a Monday.
Or Monday.
Or Thursday, or Thursday, or Saturday.
The other thing, Brent, would be interesting to find out if someone to go there.
Sometime in
I mean, are we
December.
all doing that for $200? Or are we all doing this for $1,000?
Yeah, no, what they put on the brochure is, over the course of a whole season, there's over $1 million that gets doled out to charities to run concessions at the thing. So the guy that I was talking to said his organization, they work like 3 or 4 games a year, and it's the bulk of their money that they earn, and it just works out for them really well. So I'll get the ball rolling and get this started and circle back on potential Packers fundraiser thing. Okay, excellent. Last item and other updates, and this is we are not going to be talking about tonight. Initial considerations on bylaw revisions. So since the spring meeting in April, made it through. I've provided each of you the bylaws, whether it's electronic or printed form, so you all should have them. And what we've done is gone through and spiked out separate articles which delineate parts of the bylaws, sections. Excuse me, Doug. What did we miss? What? No. Oh, you're not talking. I thought somebody was talking to me. Okay, so this splits out the article section and potential topic in the bylaws, action items that we could pursue. These are all areas that they could be freshened up. It certainly doesn't need a hard revision, but these are some initial considerations on the bylaws. Ron's comment at the last meeting was, this isn't a one-meeting thing. This is a multi-meeting, multi sort of conversational approach. So that's what this is. This is just to get the ball rolling and for you to read in your leisure. What I'll look to do is make a small agenda point in the October meeting to loosely discuss bylaw revisions, but my expectation of the October meeting is it will be heavily concentrated on the lake planning grants, which we'll be submitting before the January meeting. So I don't expect heavy conversation on this in fall, but certainly put just a touch on the agenda. That sounds okay to everybody.
Question, Doug, do you remember who did the original bylaws, or was Bernie?
John Blazel.
John Blazel did it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there another person out there, maybe even a consultant that has experience with organizations like ours and bylaws, or don't you think we need that, Brat? Can we think this out ourselves, or are there just a few things that jump out at us as far as membership and things like that? But
this list, I think it's like 14 things that I've got on here. There's nothing significant in it. It's more of a freshening up. Okay. I think hastily making any change to the bylaws or governing document for the organization is not a desirable approach in my view. So getting the appropriate counsel folded in with making revisions, I think, is could be useful. And I think before we get to that point, we just need to consider what we're really looking to do before we get there. Because if we went to the guy and said, hey, we want to make some changes, I think the first thing he'd say is, well, what are you looking at? So this is really that first look at what are we maybe looking at doing. And maybe there's nothing here, maybe there's a bunch of things we want to do here. I don't know. It's just the introductory opening shot across the bow.
I don't think any of us run the risk of going to jail.
No, no. Okay, so that is all we need on bylaws this evening, and that concludes the structured part of the agenda. Last item is public input and other matters. Anybody have anything, whether comments from the Brat Friday you might have heard from people, just being out and around, questions, concerns, comments, anything? You know, we're entering a significant part of our, a significant new part of our organizational history. Public outreach is going to be important, and anybody have anything, let's talk about it out. All right. Well, all I have Brat fry, we did the free drawings like we did in prior years, and one of the gentlemen who won a prize, I dropped it off, and he said he really enjoyed talking to the guys at the info table. Thank you, Bob and Doug and Ron, everybody who was over there. I'm not sure who he got when, but he said, you know, I live here at Ripon. I really like what you guys are doing out there. I'd like to make this week's meeting. I don't think I can, but I'm really looking to be a part of the project and help do stuff. It's like, okay, that's very encouraging to me. So that's some very positive remarks. Some less than positive remarks were when I posted the channel spraying to the north land, or the channel pictures going to the north launch. There was the great, so you could do it in a mud boat, but no one else can. And I said,
You
no.
gotta consider who that comment came from.
Yeah, but then too, there was just general concerns on the north part of the lake, like, oh, there's water out there, and the vegetation just being in a really difficult set of circumstances. The comment was, in my view, there shouldn't be difficulty getting to or from a boat launch, which I think sums up our issues on the north end pretty well.
There should or shouldn't be?
There shouldn't be issues getting to or from a boat launch. If it's challenging to get to or from the boat launch on the lakeside, then what's the point of the boat launch? So it should be easier than it is now.
Okay, that goes back to my original discussion on it, is that it's supposed to be a skiff launch more than anything else.
Yeah, and that person, I asked them if they had any pictures of the area they were working pre-restoration, and it was a lot of water, and there was some cattail bogs, but nothing crazy. And they've assured me now it's basically solid cattail. I haven't seen the picture for it, but I think it just affirms the opportunity that presents itself on the northern half of the lake. That it's out there. Other comment on public input. We recorded the Stantec Q&A meeting on audio, and Seth missed, so I was able to successfully share that with Seth online so he could hear the questions and responses after the fact in his absence. And with Bruce Miller being gone tonight, I would like to share that with him too. So I've been recording this meeting. But you know, when I think of public input and reaching out to people, you know, nowadays it's like, you know, internet's everywhere. When we found it, it was like, okay, well, you could download a song, but you know, you can download 4 minutes, it'd be really challenging. Now people listen to 2 or 3 hour podcast shows that are daily programs every day. So what I'd like to do, and what I'm planning to do, unless there's a vote of the majority present, is I would like to take that audio and post it online, whether it be to like a Dropbox account that I can share, or it's on YouTube. I don't really know what's the easiest way to share it right now. But you know, when I think of public outreach, I think of, you know, all these guys who come up and hunt and fall, who don't live here, who care about the lake, who want to be a part of the lake, and you know, would love to be here tonight and be a part of it, but they have no way of being here on a Thursday night from 7 till 9 o'clock. So I'm planning on posting the audio from this and sharing it online so that people can listen in and understand what we're really talking about out here, unless you stop me.
The thing I like about that too is, you know, I drive a lot. I'm in tractors and stuff like that a lot. I can listen to the stuff that I've missed or something that I want to go back on anytime I want, because I have a smartphone. You can just look it up and listen to it. I think it's a great idea.
So I'm going to do that. If nothing further, then our next meeting is Thursday, October 10th.
11th?
Thursday, October 11th. Thank you, Art, for correcting me. And at 7 o'clock here, based on Ron's belief, but I'll certainly confirm the date with Kyle Gron tomorrow to get it reserved. Okay. Anything else?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, move to adjourn. Made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you in October, and the 5 on the subcommittee. I'll be talking to you sooner than that. Thank you.
Still is here. Or bags are there. Do you want these?
See where the two.
Can you leave this?
No,
like
leave them
this?
right the way they are, it'll be fine.
Okay.